Okay, so in this video we're going to go over kind of how to set up Google Data Studio for use in custom visualizations. So with Google Data Studio you can basically use it to create visualizations from multiple different data sources. One of the first things we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and create our data source here. So this will kind of get everything connected. We've got to acknowledge these different terms, accept. If you want to sign up for newsletters and stuff, you can. I'm just going to say no to all these. Okay, so it allowed us through there. Now we're going to go to create again, and you can see these are all the different data sources that we can use. Google Sheets, different Google Cloud storages, connecting to a MySQL or Postgres database. You can also use any of these other partner connectors. There's a lot in here. So it kind of becomes a data lake that you can use. So what we're actually going to be focusing on is the Data Studio community visualizations here. And note that it is in a developer preview state right now. So there are some things that are going to be changing as it grows. So the first thing we're going to want to do here is get the tooling so that way we can execute it. So I'm using Node version 12.10, NPM version 6.11.3, and the command I'm going to execute is npx at google/dsccgenviz. npx will work on pretty much all the newer versions of npm, so you shouldn't have to worry too much about that. I'm going to say no, that I don't want them to collect analytics on me. And it'll give me a little note saying that I need to set up GS utils. Now that you'll notice that nothing was installed there, so I've got to go and set up GS utils first. I'll go to the handy little link that they gave me, and it'll have a couple commands in here for me to run. Now note I'm doing everything on here on a Mac. I find development on Mac a little bit easier. There are ways to do this in Windows and Linux, but I'll be executing the Mac commands here. So I'm going to go up a directory, but I'm going to curl this command to pull down the tooling for it. It'll run, ask me for my SDK. Do I want to help it prove Google Cloud? No. And this will just take a few more seconds. Yeah, now I actually do want to update my path, so I'm going to go ahead and say yes. I'm going to use my default bash profile. So I'm just going to hit enter. Okay. Now that should be set up. If I go ahead and restart the shell, I should now be able to run my gcloud init. Whoops, forgot the G. Okay. It'll go ahead and check network. It's going to ask me to log in through Google. So just go here. I'm already logged in on this computer, so I will log in, allow. Okay. And I'm authenticated through the Google Cloud, so that's good. I've already got a couple projects here, so I'll go ahead and use an existing one. So I've got my Ohio-Dev one here, and looks like that is set up now. All right, now we're going to go back up to our cloud here, go to our console, and we need to set up a, in the Google Cloud, we need to set up a data store, so that way we can have something to push the code to that we're going to create. So we want to go to storage. We're going to click Create Bucket. We're going to pick a bucket name. So let's go ahead and try, that's our project name up there at the top. Let's try something a little bit more simple. Demo bucket. Oh, right, it has to be globally unique, so we're going to go ahead and create Ohio-Dev bucket. And this will be basically the name that we reference whenever we push the code to this bucket. Okay. We have our bucket. It is called Ohio-Dev bucket. Okay. So now we're going to CD back into our user shared repos and my Ohio-Dev Data Studio. Go ahead and run that. Now we're going to go ahead and execute the command that will set up our new project, and that's npm at google/dscc-genviz. And this will basically generate a starter project or a boilerplate, so that way we can get up and running pretty quickly. It's actually npx, not npm. Okay, enter my project name one more time. That's the project name there. Enter. Now the bucket name inside of here, we're going to go to Overview, and you can see what your link is there for the GS utils. So you don't include the project name, you just want the begin or the globally unique name there. So go ahead and enter that. They also give you the option of having a prod bucket as well, in case you want one for dev and one for prod. I'm just going to use the same one since I'm not going to be pushing any of this to prod. It'll go ahead and install its dependencies, which is basically, I'm assuming, doing an npm or some install behind the scenes. We've got our npm run start to begin working. So if we cd into this, we can see that we've got our files that were generated. We can go ahead and open this up in an IDE or a text viewer, and we can run npm start, and that will start our server. You'll see here, this is the content for just the boilerplate. So I'm going to open this up in Atom. Verify Atom. Open it up. Again, this is running on localhost 8080. Open that. It's actively compiling and running any of the changes that we make. In our source, we've got a few different folders here. We've got the standard package.json, yarnlock. This is all pretty standard for a node project. This here is our data, index.json. This kind of defines the different fields that you can use in your visualizations. The ID here is basically whatever ID you want it to be. The label is what the user will see. We've got two different types right here, a dimension and a metric. Metric is, a number. Dimension is usually like a string or something. but you can have a min and a max. Min will basically make it a required field. Having a max and min as one basically says like you only have one of those. If I increase it to a max, it would allow you to have more than one piece of data in that field there. Having this true will run it locally. Whenever you change it for false, it'll actually look for that subscribe to data, which is the data studio method. But if we go look at the website, you can see it's already rebuilt it and it's no longer rendering locally. We change that back to true, loads it again. Inside of our local messages, this is kind of the mock data that's getting fed into that graph on the page. Whenever you're building out these visualizations, you'd want to update those data points as well. And this can really be anything. It's just static data that's getting fed into these two fields here. The dimension ID and the metric ID are what it's looking for in this field here. Manifest.json kind of describes what this is if people were to view it inside of Data Studio. We're not going to worry too much about that. The real meat that we're going to get into is these two files here that are readme viz and first viz. You'll see those are coming from the DSCC scripts, and we can go ahead and dig into that. That'll be in our node modules. So we're going to go ahead and create a copy of those two files. That way we can have kind of a basis to create our own with. We're going to create a viz, and then we're going to go ahead and create a new file. We'll call it myviz, I think, .js. Okay, so now we need to go back into where it's currently pulling that graph from. DSCC scripts, viz, and initial viz. And we're just going to grab all of this. This is doing a lot of stuff with canvases and things, but we're just going to grab this for a few different key parts that we'll want in ours. Makes it a little bit easier as a starting point. Okay. Start by deleting some of the stuff we don't need. We don't need this HTML block here for the README. Again, this is getting read in from the Google data scripts. We're going to update it to look locally. So it's going to look at myviz. We're going to go ahead and delete that README visualization. So you can see here, deleting that README visualization, removed it from there, adding it back in, adds it back in. Okay, so let's delete that because we don't need that. We're going to go back over to myviz and just clean this up a little bit so that way we can keep the structure, but we don't need most of these comments and other things. They are using Apache license. So this is basically just using JavaScript to build up different HTML elements. They're using Canvas to draw the bar graphs with a lot of math. So this is kind of important here. The row with the ID of metric ID is how you get the elements. So we're going to keep this row.data for each. Delete the rest out of there. We're going to go ahead and delete this. Let's see, all the way up to, we don't need any. All right, we're going to clean up some more of this. Grab that one element that will be able to get us grabbing data from the data source. Everything else, though, we can pretty much get rid of here. This is just appending things to parent nodes. Delete that. And then we're going to kind of modify this a little bit at first. pull that out of the README viz, and we're just going to have the single exported const here, my first viz. Put that in here, and we're going to change this from README div to just example div. And example div, and just go ahead and style this example div as our main div for now. So we'll go ahead and add a height and width to it. So example div.style.height equals 500. And I'll show you how to view this as HTML, because one thing to note, right now I'm putting these as 500 because they will not render like that. They need to be specifically, some kind of unit, like 500 pixels or 500 point or something along like that line. But if I go over there and try to view this, we're going to append that child. I won't be able to see anything on the screen because the height and width are not set correctly. So we'll just go ahead back over to here. We'll inspect, and we can see inside of the Google Chrome inspect that we have our body, we have our background or our div with a background of red, but it has no height and width. So we'll just go back over to Atom, and we'll add those height and width to that, so that way you can actually view this sheet. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and add 500 pixels and 500 pixels. Okay, save that, and there's our red div. Now I'm going to take this, and what I'm going to want to do is basically for every row in our sample data, I'm going to want to create a box. So this is very common if you want to do, create some kind of rendering for each piece of data. You could do this with graphs. You could do this, making like a row in a table or something. We're just going to call a function create line, and what it's going to do is it's going to create one of those boxes. And we don't want it to be quite as big, so we'll change the height a little bit. We'll keep it as red. Maybe green. I want to add some text to it, and I worry that green might be harder to show, but we'll keep it there. Try it out. Create line. Oh, I need to make this a function. So go ahead and make it a function so that way it'll execute, and there's our green box. Now notice it just looks like a large green box right now because I actually have 5 points of data at 100 pixels each. So we're actually going to add some margin in between those, and we'll make it 10 pixels. Not rendering. So that's not rendering because it's actually probably throwing an error in the console because the elements are not rendering because I have that instead of example div, I have just example. It doesn't throw an error here, but it just doesn't render. So there's some issues here, but all I need to do is change example to example dev over on line 17. Example div, sorry. And there we go. All right, so we've got one box for each point of data. Now, if we wanted to grab information out of one of those data points within our data source, in this instance, our data source is coming from the sample data source in the index. So what we're going to want to do is read in each line. So we're getting that right now from our row, and we've got dim ID and metric ID. So we'll just go ahead and read in the dim ID from, it's coming from local message. Dim ID from local message. This is all of our sample data. We'll just go in here. we're going to take create line. It's going to pass in our row for the data. And it's going to take whatever row it's on, grab the dimension ID, and that's going to be our dimension ID, or our dimension, I guess. And it's also important to note that there can be multiple items in this single dimension ID. So if there's just one, you get index of 0. Otherwise, you'll want to get like index of 1, 2, 3, so on and so forth. So we're going to go ahead and create just a pretty simple HTML block here, and we're going to add it to the example div. So we're going to create an h1 with the text of whatever is in the dimension data. Okay. So now what we're going to do is we're going to let this be called my header, and then we're going to set our example div dot inner HTML is equal to my header. Go back, and there we go. And since there's only one data point, we don't have to put the 0, so we're just getting the first one there. Okay. And that again is coming from each one of these data points inside of our sample data. $25. If we change this to some other data, it would be updated whenever the visualization is run. So we add this is only a demo. And if we go look over there, we can see that that data is updated in there. All right. Now the next thing we're going to want to do is actually change this so we can view it in Google Data Studio. So we're going to change local to false, so that way it will do the DSCC subscribe to data. You'll notice that the local instance is no longer there. Now we're going to want to build and deploy to dev, our dev bucket. So this will push all of this code into our cloud storage, so that way Google Data Studio can read from it. We're going to go ahead and run our npm run build dev and npm run and npm push dev. And we actually need to do an npm run push dev, because yep, I only did a npm push dev. We need to do a run in front of that. So npm run build dev and npm run push dev. So this will build the code, anything it needs for this, and then it'll also push it up to our bucket that we set up with the Google Knit. So there's our bucket there. Copy that. We're going to want to go ahead and go back to our Data Studio. We're going to want to set up a data source as well that we're going to need for this. So I'm just going to grab one of the Google example sheets that I have sitting around. Okay, so I can see all the items owned by me, and we're going to want to go ahead and just select one of the samples I have. We'll select budget. Okay, you'll notice if you have multiple sheets inside of this spreadsheet, multiple worksheets, it'll list those there, but since I only have one, whenever it's created, it will link that data source. It's very convenient whenever you're using the Google data sources, because it just allows you to basically import them immediately. So we've got our new report here. We're going to select our data sort of budget. It's going to say that we need to add that. We're going to add our community one here that we just uploaded. Go to add, and you'll notice here it says community visualizations are disabled. That's because inside of the data source, every time we add a data source here, we need to allow community visualizations access. And you'll have to do this anytime that you add a new data source and want to use community visualizations. Let's go ahead and remind me later. Alright, going back to our report, currently it's just called Untitled Report. We can see here that the visualization loaded and our data is there from our spreadsheet. So that's it for how to basically get started with Google Data Studio. Thanks for watching, and go ahead and hit that like and subscribe button if you enjoyed the video. The more support I'm able to get on this channel, the more content I'll be able to create. So again, thanks for watching. This has been Jared from Ohio Dev. Good morning, and let's go make something.